1973. Picture it. Long lines of cars stretching for miles, gas stations with no gas signs, and a creeping sense of panic across the Western world. For most people, this was the year the lights went out, the year a group of distant desert nations brought the mighty industrial West to its knees. It was called the oil crisis, a sudden, shocking event that seemingly came out of nowhere. But what if I told you this wasn't an accident? What if the chaos, the fear, and the economic turmoil were not just a consequence, but part of a calculated plan, a plan that would forever change who holds the real power in our world? This isn't just a story about oil. It's the story of how a secret deal, struck in the shadows, dethroned gold and crowned a new king, the petrodollar. And the nation that benefited most might be the last one you'd expect. To understand how this happened, we need to go back to a time when the world worked very differently. For decades, the global financial system was anchored to gold. Under the Bretton Woods Agreement, the US dollar was pegged to gold at a fixed price, and other currencies were pegged to the dollar. It was a system built on trust in American economic strength. But by the early 1970s, that trust was wearing thin. The Vietnam War and massive social spending had left the U.S. with soaring inflation and a ballooning deficit. Other countries, seeing the writing on the wall, started demanding gold for their dollars, rapidly draining America's reserves. In 1971, President Nixon made a drastic move. He unilaterally severed the dollar's link to gold, effectively ending the Bretton Woods system. The world was suddenly adrift, with no stable anchor for its currencies. The global economy was on the brink of chaos, and the U.S. was losing its grip. It desperately needed a new way to secure its dominance. The answer, it turned out, was buried deep beneath the Arabian Desert. Then came October 1973. In response to American support for Israel during the Yom Kippur War, the Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OAPEC, led by Saudi Arabia, did the unthinkable. They declared an oil embargo against the United States and its allies. Overnight, the price of oil quadrupled. The lifeblood of the industrial world was choked off. Western economies, built on the assumption of cheap, endless energy, shuddered to a halt. Factories closed, unemployment soared, and for the first time, people in America and Europe felt a profound vulnerability. They realized that their entire way of life depended on decisions made thousands of miles away. On the surface, this looked like a disaster for the United States, a humbling blow to a superpower. But behind the scenes, a brilliant and ruthless strategy was taking shape. American strategists, like Henry Kissinger, saw not a crisis, but a golden opportunity. While the public was panicking, top-level U.S. officials were engaged in secret, high-stakes negotiations with the one country that mattered most, Saudi Arabia. The deal they struck would redefine global power for the next 50 years. It was an elegant, almost diabolical solution to America's problems. The United States offered the Saudi royal family a simple proposition: military protection, advanced weaponry, and a guarantee of their political survival. In exchange, the Saudis had to do two things. First, they had to convince OPEC to price all of its oil sales exclusively in U.S. dollars. Not in British pounds, not in German marks, not in gold, only dollars. Second, they had to invest their massive profits, their petrodollars, back into U.S. government debt securities. Think about how brilliant this was. By making the dollar the only currency to buy oil, the U.S. created a permanent artificial global demand for its currency. Every country, whether a friend or foe, needed to acquire U.S. dollars to buy the energy essential for its survival. This petrodollar system effectively replaced the gold standard. Instead of being backed by a shiny metal, the dollar was now backed by a barrel of oil. Suddenly, it didn't matter how many dollars the U.S. printed or how large its deficit grew. As long as the world needed oil, it would need dollars. This gave the United States an unprecedented economic advantage. It could essentially export its inflation to the rest of the world and finance its deficits with other countries' money. The oil-producing nations would get rich, but their wealth would be held in U.S. banks, funding American debt. It was a closed loop, a perfect recycling system where the U.S. was at the center of everything. The 1973 crisis wasn't a defeat for the U.S. at all. It was the masterstroke that secured its economic empire for the next generation. The chaos on the streets was just the cover for the biggest financial power shift in modern history. For the rest of the world, the consequences were profound. European nations and Japan, heavily reliant on imported oil, were hit hard. Their currencies weakened against the newly strengthened dollar, and they were forced to hold vast dollar reserves, effectively propping up their main economic competitor. Developing nations were caught in an even worse trap. Not only did they face crippling energy costs, but any loans they took from international institutions were denominated in dollars, making their debt burdens even heavier as the dollar's value rose. The petrodollar system created a clear hierarchy in the global economy, with the U.S. firmly at the top, oil-producing nations as wealthy but dependent partners, and everyone else paying the price. This system explains so much about modern geopolitics. Why does the U.S. have such a strong military presence in the Middle East? It's not just about oil. It's about protecting the system that underpins the dollar's global dominance. But today, we're seeing the first real cracks in this 50-year-old system. The world is changing. The rise of China as an economic superpower presents a direct challenge. China is now the world's largest oil importer, and it's increasingly settling oil trades in its own currency, the yuan. Russia, facing Western sanctions, has also pivoted away from the dollar. Even traditional U.S. allies, like Saudi Arabia, are now openly discussing accepting other currencies for their oil. The move towards renewable energy, though slow, also poses a long-term threat. If the world's reliance on oil decreases, what happens to the petrodollar? This isn't just an economic question. It's a question about the future of global power. The unraveling of the petrodollar system could lead to a dramatic decline in American influence and a level of global financial instability we haven't seen since the 1970s. So the next time you hear about oil prices or tensions in the Middle East, remember the story of 1973. It's a powerful reminder that history is often driven by events happening just out of sight. The long gas lines weren't just about a fuel shortage. They were the visible symptom of a hidden economic war, a war that America won decisively by turning a crisis into a coup. They replaced a system backed by gold with a system backed by oil, creating a global demand for the dollar that has sustained their power ever since. But as new powers rise and the world pivots away from fossil fuels, the foundations of that empire are beginning to shake. The great power game that began in 1973 is entering a new, uncertain chapter, and the world we know is about to change once again. Thanks so much for watching. What do you think the future of the dollar is? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story fascinating, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you never miss another deep dive into the stories that shape our world. See you in the next video.